Tuesday, February the 28th. Boy, this year is flying by.
It is.
Agenda session, 3:30. I will take a motion on the minutes, please.
Second.
Have a motion for the minutes. They will stand without objection. Council, I'm sure we'll have a few items to talk about before we get into our committees this afternoon. So if you will look at ordinances under final reading. Councilman, know any issues on your zoning case?
No, it is good to go.
Very good. Moving into ordinances on first reading. Council office item A. Any questions or comments on first read this evening? This is our short-term vacation rental district
That's you.
legislation. Councilwoman Noel, you have the floor, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to make an amendment, if that's possible.
Would you
for-
like to discuss the
To
amendment?
discuss it.
Okay.
Okay.
Because that amendment, if made, would be
Yes.
made at our 6 o'clock meeting. Please go ahead.
For the footage to be 1,000.
Would you dive into that just a little bit for us?
Yes,
Give us some
and the
context.
reason being is that it would allow us a fewer short-term vacation into District 8. Definitely a major difference from 500 feet.
So if you'll allow me, first of all, we will open up for conversation, but Mr. Attorney?
Yes.
Will you please go to the section in the ordinance where Councilwoman Noel was referring? If you can find that for me.
Yes, sir.
And I tell you what, I am going to open the floor for discussion. So we have an open discussion on this. If anybody needs to make comments.
Said our queue is disabled.
It's open.
Is it, are we open discussion?
You're
Open
live.
discussion. Councilman?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Personally, I would be opposed to that. I mean, I hear Councilwoman Noel and her concern. I think we have publicized and everybody is fully aware of the 500 feet. And I think that's what the majority of the other cities that we looked at were either 300 or 500. Personally, I would be opposed to it.
And so if you're following along, I'm going to, Mr. Attorney, this is the radius that would be set within the parameters.
Yes.
Much like we do a liquor store to.
I think to a certain extent, Mr. Chair, it would effectively shut it down.
Okay, I appreciate your comments. We still have an open floor.
May I say something else?
Yeah, it's open conversation.
Okay, so, I don't feel like it would shut it down. Matter of fact, I'm quite sure it would not shut it down. But, who says that we have to be cookie cutter? Who says that we have to follow what everybody else does? Chattanooga is not, we're very different in a lot of ways. So we don't have to be cookie cutter.
I agree with that, but I disagree with the amendment.
And we can agree to disagree. That's good, yeah.
On a regular basis all over.
1,000 feet instead of 500.
Councilman, please.
Can we make it specific to her district 8? Is that possible?
That's a question for the attorney.
The question for Mr. Noblet, because I do not know the answer to that.
Thus far, the section of the ordinance that is before you on here in section 11.512, section O has got a buffer zone. And that buffer zone says currently no absentee short-term vacation rental site may be located within 500 feet from the nearest absentee short-term vacation rental certificate holder within the single-family detached zoning district, except as how we've accepted it above. If you're going to do a different, location for where this would be applicable, I think you need to do that based upon your district map that you have in effect for allowing short-term vacation rentals to occur. But we can add that requirement here. The one concern I would have as to 1,000 feet is someone needs to do a study of how many locations would actually qualify within the city limits if you try to do something with 1,000 feet for the entire city. And would that effectively result in you couldn't do them or not? So that's something that needs to be done by RPA.
Mr. Chair. So on December 12th, 2022, when brought the concept of the 500-foot buffer and, or a buffer option along with a percentage in multifamily housing as an idea. He provided a document that was estimated allowable STVRs with new buffer restrictions. And that was what I used to inform my preference for the 500 versus the 300, which was originally what he had brought. So looking at that, I don't know what the percentage would be. Do you have a percentage with the 1,000-foot buffer that we could see?
With 500, it would be 45 more into District 8. With 750, it would be, I think it was 25, and with 1,000, it would be 15.
Okay. So I wonder what percentage that would do across our districts. Because with the 500-foot buffer, estimated parcel or available short-term rentals as percentage of parcels, 500 feet was going to be 7.2% in District 1 in Councilman Henderson's. 1.6 in District 2, we're very built out already with a lot of them, and I guess. District 7 was 3.5%, and this is of total housing stock. District 8 was 3%, District 9 was 2.9%, for an average of 3.3% of all residential that would be potentially available. So, so that was kind of what I based my comfort level on. I don't want us to run afoul of the law. I mean, to essentially create an effective ban would be inappropriate. I mean, would be illegal. I'd like to see, if we were gonna pursue that, I would like to see what it looks like total overlay wise, with the overall percentage of housing that would be, eligible.
Good, Councilwoman?
Yeah.
I know we're in open discussion, so any other questions or comments? So the process that we would follow if this were to go through an amendment would be at 6 o'clock. And obviously, that would be the time to ask for and motion for any amendments. Any other questions or comments on item A regarding the buffer zone?
The only thing I would like to say, 500 feet, that's nothing new to any of us up here as a concern for me. Mm-hmm. That has been with me from day one. Mm-hmm. My question from the very first is, who decided that 500 feet was the magic number? That's nothing new. So, that's all, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Floor is still open. I'll leave it open for another few seconds for any further conversation on this. Okay, we'll close our open discussion. Thank you for the conversation. Under planning item B, we have a first read in District 3. Councilman Smith.
No comments at this time, Chair.
Okay, thank you. And we have a C2 amendment. Councilman Henderson, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have, we've been trying to couple an amendment to our C2 with a special permit, and I think there's a little bit of language that still needs to be tweaked in order to couple those two together. So I'm going to ask this afternoon, if I get the light, I'm going to ask for a 2-week deferral. And maybe that's something that we need to work through or talk through, but also to make sure that we have the language like we need it that couples these two together.
Understood, sir. So we'll be looking for a motion possibly from you at 6 o'clock.
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you. Dr. Burge, you have the floor, ma'am.
Thank you, sir. I agree with Councilman Henderson. I think it's so important, and there's been a lot of really good conversation about it. and a lot of good input from all over, people in my district. I think the 2-week, I would support a 2-week deferral.
Very good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Questions? Yep, thank you very much. Questions or comments on this item? Continuing, all right. Moving into resolutions. We have some board appointments and a resolution sponsored by Councilwoman Coonrod and Councilwoman Hill. Do either of you would like to say a few words about this resolution? Councilwoman Coonrod, you have the floor, ma'am.
Thank you, Chair. We failed to include another important piece of this resolution to Governor Lee, and that's to allow the city council, city government to have an excise tax on CBD. It's a new revenue stream, and a portion of that money will be earmarked for mental health services. I am an advocate of criminal justice reform. Mass incarceration is the most pressing racial justice issue of our time, and marijuana's racist history shows the need for comprehensive drug reform. And we gotta start adding it into the conversation fabric when we're talking about, criminal with policing, racial justice, social equity, the war on drugs. Like, it's gotta be a top priority when we're having these conversations. And so many people have went to jail, lives have been destroyed because of a simple possession of marijuana. We're talking about, being unhoused, unemployed, just for this one charge of marijuana. Just imagine the many lives that would be put on a different trajectory path in a positive way just by this simple act of just pardoning those people, looking at how we can reform those laws, and just giving people a fresh start. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Did I understand you correctly that there is a missing component to this resolution?
No, I'm saying another important piece of it that's not being talked about. The news and the media only want to talk about the marijuana portion of it, but it also includes, making sure that we can use the fund or the revenue stream from CBD. It's a lot of CBD shops popping up in everybody's district. It's a revenue stream that we are not able to capture. The state hasn't regulated it yet, and the state hasn't said that the city can't create a tax for it. But I'm just looking forward, thinking on how we can capture it and put it to use for mental health.
Understood. So your resolution is intact and ready to go?
Yes.
Thank you, ma'am. Economic Development. Council, if you'll hit your light for any comments or questions. Moving into Public Works. If you will take a look at next week's proposed agenda items. And I'll watch the board for any questions or comments. Councilwoman Hill, you have the floor, ma'am.
I smiled when I saw that you're asking for approval for Richard Beelan to be named administrator for the Department of Economic Development. It made me think about last week when we asked if he was putting his name in the hat for ED of the library, and he had that little Cheshire grin, and now we know why. I'm sure that Jermaine will be happy to have, Jermaine's here, be happy to have somebody doing some of that water carrying on his behalf. And I think Richard would be a great fit for that.
Very good. Appreciate those comments. I am very excited to announce an MOU with the Chattanooga Kiwanis on next week's resolutions in regard to the Harvest Inclusive Playground in District 4, which is extremely unique and very special to our area. And I've asked Captain Schuyler to come and talk to us a little bit about that next week as well. So any other questions or comments regarding next week's proposed agenda? Okay, seeing none, if you'll take a look at our purchases for this evening. And for those of you following along online and visiting us for the first time, purchases are sent out in the previous week. We have an opportunity to review and ask questions, and obviously that time, again, before we vote, to ask questions. Council, I am seeing none, so you've done your homework. Thank you. You would take a look at future considerations. I do have one comment or question that I need to address under Public Works. Mr. Taylor, are you with us this afternoon? Oh, there you are. So I noticed under Parks, Public Works and Wastewater, Public Works, item 1 and 2 actually share the same caption. They share the same project description, and they share the exact same dollar amount. If you'd like to either address that, or we obviously have time to correct that, as this is not on our agenda yet. This is in future considerations, and if that's a clerical error, you can simply let us know.
Thank you, Chairman. I had to ask Bill to fill me in, but yes, I will look at both of those and figure out what we have wrong on both those, get those corrected before they get on the agenda.
Okay, I
Thank you,
want to
sir.
make that note. Thank you for taking time to address that. All right. Any other questions or comments for future considerations, council? Very good. We have no well, actually, we do have a department report, or is this in committee? We're in committee there. This is your committee. Yeah. No department reports this afternoon. We do have an Equity and Community Development Committee and a Legislative Committee. And I believe, Madam Vice Chair, Equity and Community Development Committee will commence first, so I'll swap places with you, and you have the chair.
Hey, Phil. All right, hello, everybody. Welcome to Equity and Community Development. Can I get a motion on the minutes?
So moved.
Thank you so much. The minutes have been approved. Today, we have two presentations. I changed up the order a little. First, we will have a presentation, a quarterly department report by Community Development, followed by a presentation by United Way. So, Tony, come on up.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of council. As our council chair, our committee chair has instructed me to keep it short, and I will be obedient and do so. So we just wanted to share just a couple of minutes and updating council on some of the activities in our community centers, re-engaging our communities and looking at being more holistic in our approach. For those here, it's just showing you a recap of how we started re-engaging post-COVID. Many of you may remember that during that period, we were very limited in our engagement with the communities. And following the post-COVID era, we worked with our community health team and looking at what our capacities would be in trying to do a slow roll and re-engaging with our community. And our first large event was our summer camp. We were extremely excited that although we were preparing to limit the attendance in our locations, we had over 650 participants registered and engaged in our summer camp, and it was very successful. Following that, we started planning as we were bettering our position in the city related to the numbers of the pandemic. We started programming and planning to re-engage our community. It's been a challenge because during that time period, a lot of our citizens found other things to do with their time. And so we were trying to be very intentional and strategic in how we re-engage and listen to the voice of our community. And we also took time to engage our team members in planning as well as training them and better preparing them for that re-engagement. So we moved forward, and we were selected by administration to engage into a new pilot that's called Chattanooga Improves. I won't go into all the details, but this process that our entire department engaged in taught our team and provided us a number of tools that will help us better work within our teams, keep ourselves focused on what our goals are and what the vision is and how we can be more productive, identifying process changes that will allow us to be more efficient with our work. And we took time to engage ourselves in training to know who our customer is and to truly understand where we can provide the resources and programs to meet their needs, as well as provide them exceptional customer service. Through that training, our teams learned to utilize brainstorming to address some of the concerns that we found, as well as brainstorming and looking at new ways of programming and activities. In January, we had our third all-hands meeting with Mayor Kelly, and during that time, Mayor Kelly shared with our teams in the community centers exactly, again, what community centers' goals were and how we are restructuring to be, again, more holistic in our approach and being able to listen to our citizens, be able to try to address what they'd like to see in their respective areas. During our time, we heard a number of citizens indicate they'd like to see more programming related to our seniors throughout the city. All of you are very much aware we do have one senior center at Eastgate, and it has done an outstanding job. But trying to be proactive in addressing what is being brought to our attention, the needs of other citizens in the city, we decided to do a pilot program around senior programming. And so what we did, we selected 5 centers throughout the city, and we did a 10-week pilot. And we wanted to not only address the concern of can we have programming in these centers, but try to provide them what they were already asking us for. And so we did that. And listening to the voice of those citizens who brought this to our attention, during that 10-week period, we had over 8,400 participants during that 10-week period. As you can see with those 5 centers, we had over 5,300 participants in the pilot, and 3,100 plus still participated out at Eastgate. So it didn't take away from Eastgate. It expanded the programming throughout the city. A number of citizens had indicated to us through the surveys that if we had the programming in their neighborhood, they would attend. And so some of the things that they mentioned to us that mattered was having the space and the time was really a big concern of theirs. Being able to have identified timing and the space for the activities they wanted to engage in, as well as having consistent programming and engaging and developing relationships with the staff in our centers. Just doing a comparison, pre-COVID at our Eastgate Center, we were looking at about 4,500 participants on average. And then post-COVID, again, making that comparison, we compared the 2019 numbers for that same 10-week period to match it against what we did during the pilot. And so during the post-pilot, post-COVID, and during the pilot period, we had 3,100 participants out at Eastgate. And again, as I indicated, we had over 5,300 in the pilot centers. Looking at some of the programming that we provided during that time period, you can see that the pilot program categories included, of course, fitness, social service and club activities, sports, and table games. The most popular of the sports activities, and I'm sure none of you are strange to that, is pickleball. We had over 2,500 individuals who were engaged in that, and that number continues to grow. Of course, badminton and line dancing. And so we're looking to take that information and to expand what we're doing currently by categorizing the types of programs that we like to see throughout. And that's have programming that are health related, that does include our fitness and sports, arts and culture, special events, and social services, providing those programs that not only internally that our department provides, but engaging with partners in the city that can also bring those resources to our centers. And as you can see, our next steps are to enhance the programming and expand these offerings throughout the community and take advantage of any grant opportunities. So I hope I met my goal of keeping it short. So if you have any questions, I'd be glad to entertain them.
All right, council, are there any questions? Councilwoman Coonrod? Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Sammons, for all that you all are doing with our YFD sites. I'm not the pickleball person, I'm more of a racquetball person, but at my centers, what I see, especially in Eastdale, since you all have started having pickleball, I'm seeing a diverse group of people in the rec centers, and you know, that makes me happy because we have so many people moving into our neighborhood now that are not Black, and what I've seen is they haven't felt comfortable with coming to the Eastdale Center. Now they feel like it's a place that is for them to attend as well.
Great.
And so we see a different variety of people that's playing pickleball. I have, stopped at the Glenwood Center a time or two and participated in the line dancing and the badminton. And hey, those seniors don't be playing on that spade table.
They don't.
Whoa, Lord, they run me up out of there every time. But thank you all for doing what you're doing. I don't know if it's any center directors here. I know Marcus used to work.
Yes, they're here, both the center directors and our managers as well, if you would stand up.
Yeah. Man, I just appreciate everything that you all do because, I grew up in the rec centers when I was younger. We went from the girls' club to the rec centers, and this was when the rec centers was open to 9, 10 o'clock at night. And there would be times that my family, my siblings and I, the center directors would be transporting us home, or they made sure that we, had something to eat, or if mama went home, we was getting transported to my grandparents' house. It was a safe community, a safe group of people that made sure that we was okay. They covered us. So I appreciate it. It'll always be a part of what I'm passionate about and making sure that we have the right resources, the right programs at our community centers. Now, all I ask is that you open them back later in the evenings when our kids can really utilize them during those times, and perhaps think about opening back up on Saturdays.
As I indicated, we started slowly, and as we continue to move forward, those things will be taken into consideration.
Thank you.
All right. I don't see any more questions, so you did a great job. Thank you so
Thank
much,
you, ma'am.
Tony, and thank you
I
for all
tried
the
to
work
stay
that you
timely.
do. You did, and I appreciate you. Thank you for all the work you all do. Next, we will have a presentation by United Way.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
See you. Good afternoon. Thank you so much, members of the council, and especially committee chairwoman Herkita Dotley. We're so glad to be here. And thanks to some of our United Way volunteers and staff and our partners from the Chattanooga Housing Authority who came to join us today. I'm Leslie Scarce. I'm the president and CEO of the United Way of Greater Chattanooga and have the privilege, I know, of working with a lot of you often. I know that sometimes you may know the United Way, especially over the past 100 years. We just celebrated a birthday for engaging workplaces around the community in giving back, or maybe granting funds to 64 local nonprofits across the community, or deploying thousands of volunteers, or standing up tutoring in YFD centers and partners across the community with Hamilton County Schools. But what I'm here to talk about today is one of the most essential connected services that we provide to the city of Chattanooga through 211. And I want to give an update on the contract that we have with the city, and then answer any questions that you all might have really transparently. So I want to just start with the facts and very clearly say, what is 211? 211 is one organized place to go to get help. It's an emergency response service to connect to essential human needs. And what a lot of people may not be aware of is that there are over 200, this is a tongue twister, 200 211s nationwide, but our United Way of Greater Chattanooga has been running ours since 1982. And we serve a 15-county region, and that was assigned to us by the Tennessee Public Utility Commission. But the vast majority of our calls and where we're able to serve are within Hamilton County and the city of Chattanooga. So very specifically, 78% of the calls that we get, and then 70% come from the city of Chattanooga. And so we are more than a referral, it's more than a handoff. We actually work to coordinate a myriad of essential coordinated services that people need that you see right here, like food, housing and shelter, utility assistance, disaster relief, so think back to the Easter tornadoes, employment and education opportunities, services for veterans, reentry for ex-offenders, and then emergency funding. We coordinate a lot of streams of emergency funding, even some that we house inside the United Way, so that we're actually able to pay bills right on site, or then coordinating with things like the Eviction Prevention Initiative, so that we can help get people the rental assistance they need right away. We have bilingual support, and we're open Monday through Friday from 8 to 5, and reachable through email and text. So that's just the basics about 211. So I want to dig a little bit deeper. And I want to ask you, if you would, to imagine with me for a minute about a time when either you or somebody that you loved needed help. And I know if you're anything like me, you would do anything to help them. And if there's anything that you take away from today, I want you to recognize that 211 is that place where anybody, no matter their circumstances, can turn in that moment. And often, it's the very worst, it can be the very worst day of their lives. And United Way is on the other end of that line for them. So I want to tell you why. This is our why for what we do every day. This is Alicia Walker and her 3 kids, Ariona, Envy, and Cash. And you may recognize Alicia because she is one of the families that on November 16th lost her home, not just the first time, but the second time during the Budgetel Motel closing. And Alicia was one of the very first people to reach out to 211 during the Budgetel Motel closing. And she had been between a relative's house and sleeping in her car. And United Way was working with, of course, a coordinated group of partners during that season, but we were really prioritizing families with children and those that were in unlivable and untenable living positions. She had been working up until that very day, but as you guys are aware, I'm sure like many, she had already paid her next month's rent at the motel, so she had no cash on hand. But when she called 211, y'all, she had already found a rental property. But because she was living paycheck to paycheck and she paid that first month's rent, she couldn't afford to get into that rental property. So thankfully, United Way's bridge funds, we were able to help her pay that deposit, her first month's rent. We could help her navigate transportation and start to figure out some stuff with childcare for her job, because as she put it to us, Budgetel had become her family. That was her network. And now she was not with her people anymore. And then those secondary needs like warm clothing, that came next. And, you know, our staff will tell me they never forget having that conversation with Alicia because they left in a hurry, packing up all their things. And y'all know, if you've got young kids like I have in the past, it takes an act of God to get out of your house with 3 kids anyway, right? Imagine doing that in such a rush. So they left most of their things behind. So fast forward to today. We're in touch with Alicia more than once a month. She's stable. She's on track. She is doing all kinds of great stability work. She's got a support network around her. And she is why we do this, because she has a home to call her own now. Her kids are in a safe, stable place. And they don't have to worry about where to sleep, where to wash their clothes. They just have to worry about where to grow up. And I know that's why you all care about this too. Alicia represents one of the 78,000 calls United Way's 211 will field this year. And I know I do not have to tell this group of leaders and community servants how many of our neighbors and your constituents are struggling. I know you all see it every day, but maybe you don't know this term that United Way uses often, this term called ALICE. Have you guys heard of ALICE? I know Councilwoman Burrs has, and I know Councilman Smith has. ALICE stands for Asset Limited, Income Constrained, and Employed, essentially the working poor. Those in our community who are working sometimes 2 and 3 jobs, but can't afford to pay the light bill or put food on the table. A lot of folks like Alicia that you see here. And our data shows us that in some parts of our community in South and Central Chattanooga, more than 75% of homes with children are falling under that ALICE threshold. So to be clear, homes where people are working, but it's just not enough. Everybody's got obstacles at some point. We know that, but they shouldn't have to be permanent. So at the end of the day, 211, it's not just a service, it's here to give people hope. So who is 211? You're looking at them. This is the United Way staff, plus 2 temporary positions that we're filling during different seasons of great need, who make up the 211 team. And this is important. Local Chattanoogans who are professionally trained to connect people in our community to local resources. So when a call is placed here, they're not getting directed to someplace out of state. They're not getting sent to a hotline in Washington, D.C. They are being connected right here to make local connections. And these are some of our longest tenured team members, like Tim Chavez, who's been with us for 37 years. Because they're here, they go out on the ground to places like Emma Wheeler Homes to make those deeper connections. And if these are the people that you see, you hear, and you text with on a day-to-day basis, there's also an invisible, behind-the-scenes resource directory that is powering 211. So we have full-time people that are constantly making sure that the data on the back end is right and it's correct. Because believe me, there's nothing worse than getting a resource for your kid, let's say for tutoring after school, but that resource only open from Wednesday from 3:30 to 5. These are the things you have to know, and that's why being local matters so very much, because the service is only as good as the data that's behind it. So let's talk a little bit about demand, the pre-COVID to today demand. Pre-COVID at United Way, y'all, we were fielding 38,000 calls a year. And you can easily see what has happened to today in 2022, where we are expecting over 78,000 calls this year alone. Now, in those early days, we redirected some funds, we redirected staffing, we even had EPB stand up a call center to help us fill in those gaps, but that need sustained and it's only continued to grow. We believe because of awareness, and we also believe that frankly, it's because of inflation, the cost of food, need is high, and frankly, affordable housing, where we are continuing to see even greater calls come in for our needs. We are seeing, it's important to know this, that when we look at the demographics, families of every size, every race, every background, and every age, and every month we're getting more and more of them. Now this is very interesting if you lean in a little bit closer. This is a snapshot of a current dashboard for 211, and it allows real-time tracking and real-time data about the needs, the callers, where they're located, how they're referred and helped. And in a world where data, we usually get it 2 years later, this is really powerful. It helps us know where things are happening in real time and how we can deploy resources. So if you take a look, the number 1 need is food, the number 2 is utility assistance, and the number 3 is housing. And then if you lift out a little more closely, you can see inside the top housing and shelter needs, it's rent assistance at 57.3%. So what we did during COVID to be more efficient and more effective is we stood up a food line only in partnership with the Chattanooga Food Bank so that you can press 1 for food. And then we got the wait times down to 1 minute for food assistance and streamlined that. And then just this weekend, in the Saturday paper, I hope you saw the article about 211 launching the housing line and taking over that partnership from the Regional Homeless Coalition. And then the story was on Channel 3 this morning. So we are expecting an increase of 20,000 potential calls just for housing needs in the future this year. If you want to look a little more closely, this zooms in to some of the zip codes here in the city limits, and we can crosswalk this data with things like poverty rates, unemployment, high school graduation rates. If you all want to look into this data, we will send it to you after this. So finally around demand, we look to plan for the future. We like to project out so that we can be ahead of the curve. And bottom line, we just wanted you to see, we anticipate another record year of 211 increase in 211 need. And every single data point on this graph represents a family, a neighbor, and someone like Alicia. So I want to pause for a second, and I do want to acknowledge, because you all hear from your neighbors, you hear from your constituents, that this increasing demand on 211 over the last few years has meant that wait times can feel too long when people call. And I recognize this, and I imagine that some of you might have heard this when you're talking to your neighbors and you're talking to your people, and we hear it too. And I have to tell you, the average has much improved, no doubt. Last week it was 2 minutes, but that's an average. Sometimes it's more, sometimes it's less. And when you are in your worst moment, and when you are in a crisis, and I know that if it was me and I needed help, having to wait 2 minutes would feel like 2 hours or feel like 2 days possibly. So I just wanted you to know that we're committed at United Way to always be improving, to always be getting better, to always be more efficient with things like the food line, the housing line, and never settling and never sitting back, because it's our people, it's our neighbors, and that's why we care so much. It's our mission at the end of the day. So we wanted to answer questions about the budget. Everyone wants to know, how does this work? What does the money pay for? Mostly it's people. This is a people service. And it is the people that are the 211 navigators. It's the people doing the resource directory. It's technology. It's the collaboration. And it's making sure that 211 is active at all times. Of course, it's also operations, technology, some of those other items as well. But our budget is sitting right at $1 million in its current state. Next is what makes up the investments, right? Where does the revenue come from? And this is the 2024 projection, okay? So this is where we're sitting right now. What you see here is that the city of Chattanooga contract is stacked up against a lot of other revenue sources, from foundation grants to THDA funding to restricted donations that the United Way has, to some fee-for-service. And while this is looking ahead, I can also proudly say that last year the Hamilton County made a significant investment into 211, which is quite remarkable, and we're really proud of the way they took a stand for this service that means so much to our community. And then simply in closing, I will just say this: we will continue to be ready. What 211 looks like for us is it's core to the work that we do. And that budget that you see is leveraged and embedded in the fact that it's at the center of everything else United Way does. And we will continue to respond to our calls promptly and respectfully and efficiently, but we're going to keep improving. We want this business model to be sustainable and for it to be a blend of public and private funding and public donations. We want to continue to grow that in a really sustainable way. And we want to continue to be a resource to the city of Chattanooga so that 211 is in the center of economic development, jobs, housing, public health, and that we can continue to be a connecting force in the center of all of those efforts. But most of all, we want to continue to be ready for when the 78,000 Alicias call, ready when the next tornado strikes or the next disaster, because it will, and ready to partner with you. We are thankful for what you do. We know that you see it and that you stand with us every single day with the very same concerns and needs that we have, and we're really grateful for your partnership. So what questions do you have about what you just heard or anything else that you might know, hear, or see about 211 in the community?
All right. Chairman Ledford.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. Leslie, I would be remiss if I didn't thank you for the work that United Way was conducting during the tornado. You mentioned it briefly, but I want to say, and I've said this to you many times, when we stood promoting 211 during that time, how important it was for the folks in Districts 4 and District 9 that's were affected by the tornado. Not only were you all there, you were there in an instant, and you led the way through so many different efforts, staging at the YMCA, but coordinating, and I could name a lot of agencies that were involved, so I want to make sure that's very, very clear. There are a lot of agencies,
So many.
but United Way is standing in front of us at this moment. And 211 was something that Commissioner Smedley and I stood with you and promoted during that time, and it made a difference, and it continues to make a difference. And I'm grateful for what you're able to do, and I was very happy to be part of your 100-year celebration and being able to speak on behalf of the city in celebration of that. And I'm just very proud. And I think your board members need to be very proud of the work. And you know what they do every single day. We don't have to tell you that. Keep it up. Let's keep working together. And thank you, because you make such a tremendous difference.
That team is awesome. And
It really
they make
is.
me proud every single day, and they do it all in partnership and always acknowledge that. So thank you.
And I know that you've made improvements to 211. Can you tell us anything about those improvements? Because we're seeing dramatic shifts, number-wise.
Yeah.
And even if with some extended call times, and I understand how that happens, that's easy to happen when you see such a monumental shift. On how you're planning to address that even more. I'd love to hear that.
Certainly, certainly. Well, really thankful for Abby Garrison's leadership. She is the vice president over the entire community investments team, which is where 211 falls. And essentially, one was staffing up. And when we went from 4 full-time staff to 12, that is no small thing. And we have to have people. I mean, it requires a significant investment over time. 2 is best practices. You know, we are learning from our friends at 911 and our friends at 311, and consistently, and great 211s around the country that are doing incredible things that we are putting into practice. 3 are those specific food lines, the food line, the housing line. Those services are making things more streamlined for our neighbors in need, and more streamlined to be able to dig deeper to what the callers need. Because recognize, I mean, this is not as simple as someone calls in and you refer them to a different kind of a call center. People's needs are complex. They're hurting when they're calling. They often need a minute. And so our staff are trained to dig deeper and to understand what's at the root cause oftentimes. So those calls they're lengthy oftentimes. And so if we can peel the layers back and figure out what is at the root of why someone is calling more than once or multiple times, and ensure that they're getting connected truly to the deeper community services, then we are going to do that. And siphoning off those like housing navigation, for example, will make wait times and things much more efficient for the needs of the callers who are calling in. And then community partnerships makes 211 far more effective. That resource directory being right, accurate, is huge. You know, I mentioned we have big plans for the future with 211. You know, we're just talking about current state today, because that's what is important to talk about today. But, you know, we talk often with the staff on the mayor's office and others that we will only continue to improve the referral process. We only continue to improve how 211 can be a pathway for students, for jobs, for all kinds of things in the future because of the efficiencies we have realized over the last few years. Text, chat, all of those things make it more efficient. And I think being local is the superpower. Otherwise, I don't believe people would get the true service that they need.
I agree with you. And my last point is, what I like about what you said, local matters, is because it matters because we are a community. And I feel that the best service will always come from those who live here, work here, and provide the dignity.
Right.
It's not easy to make a phone call like that.
No, it's not.
It's not easy. And to have that dignity and to have that care that you all offer, I've seen it. I've seen it firsthand. And I'm just, again, thank you for what you're doing, and appreciate you coming in here today and sharing these numbers with us. These are sobering numbers.
They are.
They're very sobering numbers. And I couldn't imagine not having you and United Way in our community. I just can't imagine it. So thank you.
Thank you all for partnering with us.
Yeah. Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right, thank you, Chairman Ledford. Next up, we have Councilwoman Coonrod.
Thank you for the presentation. I need to know where you got that jacket at. I like it. And to add it to my collection. But like Leffert said, I agree with everything that he said, because during the Easter tornado, you all, in District 9, was very helpful in our community. I remember calling Chip the morning of saying, listen, I need you to teach me how to work this chainsaw. I got a tree on my house and on my car and my neighbors too. I need to be able to get out and help. And Chip was like, now, Coonrod, he wasn't gonna teach you how. I would have been a wild woman, but I'm just thankful that you all were in place. You were on site. You all came out, made sure we had the information to disseminate out into the community so they can contact people to come remove the trees and the debris, and if they needed, shelter, where they can go take a shower, food. It was a lot of food stations that was out, and like Lefford said, it was so many partners that just organized and was able to help the city of Chattanooga. They jumped in and did their part too. I never imagined that I would be the area that I lived in, that I would be impacted by a tornado. To find myself homeless for 2 weeks until we had lights, running water. I never thought that I would have to take a shower at a fire hall or inside the city building or wherever I could, or just calling people to say, hey, do you got running water? Like, it's the basic things that we took for granted I found myself no longer that I was without. So I experienced being in those shoes for those 2 weeks, but I'm very appreciative of everything that you all do. I just got one little little request.
of course.
I'm really thankful that you all have added the reentry component to it. That warms my heart. But on a national level and locally, we've been trying to use language that humanize individuals that have been involved in the criminal system. And ex-offenders is still dehumanizing and it stigmatized people. If you would replace that word with justice impacted or justice involved.
You got it.
Thank you.
Yep.
I
Thank
appreciate
you.
it.
Thank you for teaching me that. Absolutely. I appreciate
Thank you. Again, I appreciate you all.
it. Thank you. We appreciate you too.
All right, is that it, Councilwoman Coonrod?
Yep.
All right, thank you so much. I don't see any other questions or likes. Thank you so much, Leslie, for your presentation.
Thank you.
All right.
All right.
And with that, that ends Equity and Community Development. Thank you. Next up, we have Legislative Committee.
Thank you very much. We'll call to order our legislative committee meeting. Have a motion on the minutes? A
Second.
motion and a second. No opposition, minutes will stand as recorded. We have one item on our agenda this afternoon to discuss, and this is an item that has been sponsored by Councilwoman Coonrod. And I'm actually going to read the top summary of the ordinance and then turn that over to Councilwoman Coonrod to speak on it on her behalf. So we are here to discuss an ordinance to amend the charter of the city of Chattanooga and all acts, ordinances, and other charter provisions amendatory thereof pursuant to the provisions of Article 11, Section 9 of the Constitution of the State of Tennessee, Home Rule Amendment, Title 5.3 and 5.15, to establish the time of elections and to create term limits. With that, Councilwoman Coonrod.
Thank you, Chair.
Got it.
Excited to talk about this legislation and, also excited that my colleagues have been willing to work with me on the legislation and add their input or their thoughts to it, whether if it's something that'll pass or not. At least we worked on it together. But for me in the communities that I think about often are, the voters that are majority Black and Hispanic in our community, and I look at the decline over the course of years that's in our community. And as I watch the city elections, we have low voter turnout in our city elections. The last city election we saw the numbers increase massively because we had over 15 people running to become the mayor of the city of Chattanooga, and each person, got new people excited to run. You had the first city election that I've seen that had over 7 Black people seeking to become mayor, which brought out just a whole lot of other people to participate in the election cycles. And when I think about what's happening when we go to vote in August on the county election cycles or state cycles, we have increase of participation. Now, I don't want to just downplay it and say that it's voter fatigue and use all those terms that most people come, or say black people just aren't coming out, and like that's nonsense. But I think we need to be on a cycle to where people are coming out, and it can increase the numbers across the city of Chattanooga and the county to get people to participate in our elections. In our cities, we've been a standalone, which is, if that's what we choose to continue to do, we're nonpartisan, and which is great. However, if we do choose to move our cycle, we will still be nonpartisan. And it doesn't shift us to say that we have to become partisan. That's not how it is. But we're coming off a presidential race. Right behind, months after, we're coming off the presidential race and going into a city council race, and all those national issues that's taking place, it rolls over into our city council race. Even though we can talk about how nonpartisan that we are, those issues are still gonna roll over to us to talk about it. We see it in our surveys, we see it in, at community forums that we have, that we're still talking about what the president has done and what he's implemented, and which has nothing to do with us. On that level, we're talking about local things that don't even come up in the questionnaire a lot of times. So those are the concerns, and then also term limits that I brought up, to where, I've seen for our districts, when it's only 4 of us up here now, that our districts are, it's a lot that I can say about it, but our districts, we get stuck with people in our communities, and not just our districts. But we've seen for a long term, like how somebody would just be in here for 20+ years, and then we waiting to replace them, or when we just now changing that dynamic with what you see here. And now we've got I just think term limits will be effective, will be a better thing for us on city council. Our mayor is already termed. I didn't want that 4 years to be there for the mayor. If we want to talk about extended or not, I think that was just a clerical error. It was more geared to term limits for city council members. And I made the suggestion of 4 years. I'm not, And then we also talked about, at one point, staggering the terms, but we haven't created any legislation around it yet.
All right, thank you, Councilwoman. Any questions, concerns, thoughts?
One last thing I wanted
Yes,
to
ma'am.
add is that, so the public would need to know that if this is something that we decided as a council to say, hey, we want to move forward with, the community will vote on it as a referendum on the ballot to say if they agree to have it. Because we could say, okay, sure, let's put this in motion. But the community members will be the determining factor if this is something that will actually happen or not. And although we say yes, the community members can say no. Or if we, say no, it doesn't get on the referendum. But for me, I would like to hear the voices from the community and their decision to see, what would they like to see, because we ultimately serve those individuals.
Absolutely. Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Attorney?
Just going to let you know that section 5.15 would only apply to the council here as to term limits. And there is a separate section currently in your charter that is section 8.29. And that section of the charter limits the term of the mayor to 2 consecutive 4-year terms. So this would only apply to the council if y'all think it's appropriate.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Does that cover your concern, Councilwoman?
Yes, thank you.
Great. Any other questions? I know we've gone over this item a few times. Going. Chairman Ledford?
Thank you, Chairman Smith. My question's for the city attorney. Do you have this in front of you, Phil?
Getting it right up now. Yes, sir.
So,
Thank you.
section 5.3, elections for mayor and city council members shall be held the first Tuesday in August. Is the intention to coincide with state elections?
Yes, sir, it is.
We don't vote on Tuesdays in August.
Our current provisions in the city charter here deal with Tuesday elections for the council, so it could coincide with the same date as the general election.
Which is Thursday?
First Thursday.
Well, I'm just asking a question. I'm just going by what I'm reading. I mean, I brought some of this up last time. So I don't think that's even, I don't think we can do that. And then okay, I've got a lot of questions here. Does the council have authority to change election times?
Yes, sir. At least this is a home rule municipality. The home rule municipality has the time to be able to set them
So if
whenever
we
you
had the
wish.
same time election, or same time, same date for state elections?
Yes.
We can change the time?
You can change the time at least that people would be eligible to go. The election commission itself would regulate when they're going to have people working there, though. And y'all have to pay for that cost whenever that occurs.
Oh, no, this is based on saving money. We can't have a conflict in paying time.
You would only pay for whatever amounts that you were asking for with an agreement with the election commission.
Okay. Section 4, does the council reserve the right to establish the time of elections and to set term limits by the city charter? Or is that what this referendum proposal is establishing?
Yes, sir.
To
That's
do?
what this referendum proposal would be establishing.
Okay.
And either the electorate would be willing to do that or not, if you
Okay.
pass it by ordinance.
So, okay. I said before, I've been tracking some state-led initiatives on the same topic. One of those has failed in committee since the last time that we have met. Does that have any bearing on what is before us at this time?
Well, the state of Tennessee regulates when elections can be held. They regulate when you can have special elections, when you can have municipal elections. But normally, the state election office would like them to be on the same day as they're having elections so that they don't have to pay for an extra cost for a separate time for their people to show up, unless we want to take on our own elections.
Okay, so okay. When we talk about, I have several notes here that I'm not liking what I'm reading because I think it has a lot of conflicts with what I'm watching come through on the state level, and I think it will give us quite a fit. When we talk about partisan elections, one of the reasons I believe in my research for the establishment of a election outside is to make sure that we're talking about local issues. And I'm really concerned that we are going to be lost in the voice of national politics. And we're going to be a roll-off. I mean, that's a term that means an afterthought. Why would we, I mean, I feel like that people who care about what's going on in the city are going to come out and vote. I don't like voter fatigue being used to kind of pitch this, because one of the things that I've learned being up here since 2017 is the importance. This young lady right here has taught me the importance of showing up to vote. You've taught me that, Dr. Holmes. And I think we are doing a disservice to those who are interested in local issues by trying to compete with presidential elections and state elections. I think that defeats the purpose and why our elections are set to where at the time. So that's really all I've got, Chairman. I'm sorry. I've had a lot of other references, but I think I'm going to stop there. Thank you.
All right, any other questions, thoughts, body would like to share. I'm not seeing any other lights. Oh, since I have none other, we'll go back to Councilwoman Coonrod.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your concerns, Lefford. I do not share those same concerns. And the voter fatigue, I feel like that's nonsense to use it too, but it was used in a couple of reportings when it came with this. I don't think that, for the Black community, I don't think that it's voter fatigue. But I think for us, a lot of it is, it depends on who's running and what issues are they speaking to that's gonna garner a response for them to come out, or that's gonna interest our millennials to engage them in the voting process. And right now, it's a lot of them that aren't engaged simply because of politics for political parties. And nobody's speaking in the middle of the issues of what they're wanting to come out and vote for. I agree that you're saying that we're gonna get lost in the national, but we're lost now. We're lost in the national politics as a city, and we're lost in state politics. That's why we keep finding ourselves saying, oh, well, the state is gonna preempt us, or it's gonna cause us a lot of a fit. And which you're right, because everything that they've been passing at that state legislature lately is causing a whole fit for Chattanooga. We just saw some recent stuff that rolled out. And that could be a whole story of its own, but what I would like for us to focus on is what we feel is best for the city of Chattanooga. We're a home rule state. We can, like all those questions you ask, I've already researched them with Phil before we even came to bring it to the table. And it gives us the authority to place it on as a referendum to give our citizens the opportunity to vote. Regardless of how we feel, our citizens, if that's what they want to do, then they should be able to do it. But if we decide, hey, we don't want to move forward with it, I'm actually cool with that too. At least we've brought the issue to talk about it and discuss and dialogue about it. And if we feel like, hey, we want to move forward with it, fine. Hey, let's take a step back and let's work on it a little more, or whatever it is. Or no, we just don't want to do it. But at least we sparked the conversation around it, because it's a needed conversation to have. Because we can't continue to keep coming around election time and posing the question saying why Black people don't want to come out and vote. Why our young people aren't registered in the vote. Why do we see an increase in voters when it's around this time? Quit using Black people in those ways. Just be satisfied with the outcome of what's coming out and quit coming to rally us up when we feel like that when other groups that are non-Blacks are not in the lead. Don't do us like that, is what I'm saying. So, but I'm cool with whatever the council decides to do, because we're a unit, we move together. And that's all I have, Chair.
All right, thank you, ma'am. One other light, back to Chairman Lippert.
No, I'm good. I've
You
said
good?
I've said what I need to say.
Well, thank you, sir. I appreciate your comments. I've shared many of the same sentiments, even over the many years this has come up for conversation. So, Councilwoman Coonrod, I see no further lights, and since this is a piece of legislation you are sponsoring, the next steps, should you not need any changes or amendments to what has been proposed, would be to find a co-sponsor to get it on our agenda, or seek permission by the chair to have it added, but that would be the next steps. Seeing no further lights, however, that is the last item that we'll be discussing in Legislative Committee. Anything further? Any? Oh.
Process question.
Yes, sir.
I thought according to our rules, once it went through committee, the chair would ask if we're ready to place it on the agenda, and the council as a whole would determine if we're ready for it to move forward. Is what I thought our process was, rather than having a co-sponsor. Is that right or wrong, or?
We've,
Basically what he did. He asked if it was ready to move forward and if it had a co-sponsor. And
I believe, Councilman, we've had this a couple of different ways. I'm happy either way. If the sponsor would like to find a co-sponsor to put it on, or if the sponsor would like me to ask for consensus at this point, I'll leave it to her.
Thank you, Chair. You can ask for consensus, and if find that you want to move forward with it. Like I said, I'm cool with that. If it's something that needs to take a back seat, I'm happy with that too.
Very well, let's do this officially then. I'm actually going to ask for a roll call vote on who's ready for this to move forward. Madam Clerk, we are having a roll call on whether or not the council is ready for this item to be placed on our agenda to be voted on by the body. Whenever you're ready. Sprung that one on you.
I'm kind of, I don't know how that
Councilman Henderson does that to people sometimes. Yeah, just start from the left and go all the way around with Vice Chair being second to last and me in this seat being last.
Yes, sir. All right. Got Councilman Henderson. Councilwoman Hill. Councilman Ledford. Councilman Hester.
Yes.
All right. Councilwoman Burrs.
No.
Councilwoman Knoll.
Yes.
Councilwoman Coonrod.
Yes.
Vice Chair Dotley.
Yes.
And Councilman Smith.
No. Mr. Attorney,
Yes, sir.
how's that come out?
I got 7-2 here.
Great. Please add that to our agenda. Is 2 weeks out, Mr. Chair? Is that sufficient?
Yes, sir.
Is that okay with you, Councilwoman Coonrod, 2 weeks?
And I will confirm the date of the election just to make sure the day is correct.
Yeah, if the intent is for it to align with an existing election, the language will have to be changed.
I will do it.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you, sir. Anything further to come before the body? Seeing none,
We have an attorney-client.
we are adjourned to an attorney-client privilege meeting. Thank you.